Hey guys, and welcome to episode 1 of the React Crash Course, everything you need to get started developing in React. Now in this episode, we're going to cover the basics of React and what you need to get started. We're going to cover how you install React and start your application, and then we're going to summarize with a tour of React, the files it's installed and what each one means. Now it's important that you follow this video right to the end because the next episode is going to carry on where this finished. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is this website here, reactjs.org. Now, if you scroll down the page a little, we don't need to worry about the top bit. We've got this section here, Create React App, and that's what we're going to be using to install the basic code on our machine. Now, you could go down the route of installing React and lots of other packages in order to get started, but Create React App is the absolute best way to get started and is what I use for every project. So you'll notice here it says Create React App is a comfortable environment for learning React and is the best way to start building a new SPA or single page application. It sets up your whole environment so that you can use the latest features. Now the only prerequisite for using Create React App is that you have Node version 14 or above and NPM version 5.6 or above. Now it's really simple to see if you have these installed by opening your terminal window and just typing node -v, and that's going to tell us we're on version 16.17.1, and if we do npm -v, I'm on 8.15, so I'm good to go. If for any reason you don't have Node or npm installed, you just head over to the nodejs.org website and install the latest version for your operating system. Restart your terminal, check again, but you should be good to go. And the final thing I want to just point out is that the IDE I'm going to be using is Visual Studio Code. And I've found this the best IDE to use, having tried all of them, simply because there's plugins that allow you to extend your code really easily. And it's got the inbuilt terminal, which really helps, as you'll see as we move forward. So with Visual Studio Code installed, let's open it up. And you'll want to hit File at the top, and then open folder and create yourself a folder. I've already done that and I've called it tmap. So tmap is going to be the parent directory for everything we're going to do. The next thing is to hit terminal in the top menu and then hit new terminal. Now Visual Studio Code comes with its own inbuilt terminal, which we could also split and split again. And I find this much better than using the inbuilt terminal in the operating system, because very much of the time you're going to need to have your application running, but you want another terminal window to install packages. And as we move forward to things like serverless and APIs, you'll probably want a third terminal window open to see what your API is doing. So I recommend that you use the terminal within Visual Studio. Going back to the guide for Create React App, you can see here we need to type npx create react app and then the name of the application that we want to install. So we'll head back into our terminal window, and so we'll go ahead and type npx create react app team-app and hit enter. And what that's going to do is it's going to look up the npx package and install everything we need, including the file structure, for us to be able to run a create react app application. That will take just a few minutes, so I'll pause this video for a short while. And there we go, it's installed everything we need to get started. If we head back over to the website, we can see the next command is to change directory into that folder. So we'll go ahead and hit cd test app, and then finally npm start. So npm start. And that's going to start our application so that we can see what's going on. I'll just open a new window and I'll drag that over so that you can see what's going on. So we've now got our React app running with the default code. If I go back to Visual Studio and just minimize that screen slightly, there we go. So you can see we've now installed Create React App. Let me just kill these terminals so you can see. And it's successfully running in localhost 3000. Now as we make changes to our React app, those changes are going to appear immediately in this browser, so you're not going to need to keep refreshing the page. So if we expand the team-app directory, let's have a look at the files that have been installed on our machine. The first file to look at is the package.json, and hopefully you're familiar with these files, but there's just a few things to cover here. Firstly are these three packages. So we've had React installed on our computer. We've had React DOM, which is the library that manages compiling the code into our browser and updating the DOM. And then we have React scripts, which gives us access to some commands, which you'll see here. Start, which is npm start, the command that we just typed in to get our React app started. Then we've got build, which is npm run build. And we'll cover that in a later tutorial, but that's basically the way of compiling our code into a production-ready build environment so it can be deployed to a server or to an S3 bucket, however you want to deploy it. The rest of these libraries are testing libraries, which are beyond the scope of this tutorial, but we might come back to that later. The second file to check out is in this public directory, and that's the index.html file, which is basically one of the two entry points for our application. Now, hopefully you're familiar with HTML files, and you'll see this is pretty standard. We'll remove some of these comments which make it look more complicated, but it's a basic HTML file with meta information and certain links and imports. You could obviously be importing your own CDN for Bootstrap, for example, or you could be installing some Google fonts in the header of this file. We have the title, which while we're here, we'll change that to team app and hit save. And you'll notice in the browser, the title of the page has already been changed to team app. Again, that's that hot reloading, which makes sure that our browser is always showing the up-to-date version of our code. And then the next section to look at is this div with an ID of root. And that is it for our whole application. Everything that we'll be building will be running through this HTML file and through this root div. The next file to look at, if we minimize public and expand the src or the source directory, is index.js. Now, index.js is the entry point for our React application, and it's doing a few things. It's importing React, because that's what we're developing in. It's importing the React DOM, which was one of the other libraries we saw in the package.json file. It's importing some CSS. It's importing a component called app, which we'll come back to shortly. And it's importing some web vitals, which again is back to testing that's outside the scope of this tutorial. And then the React DOM is calling a function which is going to look up that div with an ID of root from our index.html file and render our app that we're building. The main point being this app component, which is being imported on line 4. And that's the next file to check out, the app.js file in the source directory. This is, for now, where our application is being built. And all of this code here, which looks like HTML, is basically what's showing in our browser. So this file is importing a logo as a component, and that's the logo you can see here. And that's being returned on this line. So it's an image tag with a source of logo, the component that we're importing. On line 2, it's importing the app.css file, which you'll see in the source directory. And then there's this header. Now, one thing to note while we're here is this isn't HTML, this is actually JSX. And we'll get on to more about JSX in the next tutorial. But you'll notice things like, instead of class, we're calling class name. And that's because this isn't HTML, although it gets compiled to HTML by JSX. But since class is a reserved word in JavaScript, we're not going to be able to use it because it means something different. So there are a few tweaks you'll have to make to your knowledge of HTML in order to use it JSX, but it's really not that complicated. And then finally we have these CSS files, which are pretty standard. Now while we're in here, I'm just going to remove some of these files to clean things up. So we'll remove the report web vitals and the testing, minimize that. You'll notice now that our code's broken, so the browser can't render the output because there are dependencies that we've removed. remove that. And then in our app.js file, that's all fine. And then the index.js, we'll need to remove line 5 because we've just removed that file, and remove line 6, which is also a reference to the web vitals. And if we hit save, we're back up and running again. So that's the basic structure of a Create React app, and where the entry point for you guys to get started developing in React. So let's head over to the next episode, which is going to cover JSX and building your own components.